Reading 67 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll. Birdlip, Easter, March 31st, 1945. An Easter Message. I had thought of coming down for Easter and now find that it is not possible. You are having very good meetings and stimulating one another just as reports stimulate me. We were speaking today at a place you all know about what Easter means, what this concrete symbol of death and resurrection signifies. We were taking it from a small, understandable level and not in the great terms that it implies in the case of Christ. I asked, what does it mean to die to something quite small, and how could we understand that there always follows a resurrection from what we die to? Supposing that you, in a quite real way, do not go with some negative thought and its resultant feeling, supposing you really sacrifice this from yourself, from your own will, from your own understanding, will there be any resurrection? Does it mean that the same thing will recur again in the same form? Surely that would not be resurrection, but recurrence. The idea of resurrection is that the quantity of force that would have gone into this thing and has been genuinely sacrificed from one's deepest will reappears in a higher form, that is, on another level, and begins to create another form of insight, of understanding, of feeling, of thinking, just as an egg can become something quite different on a quite different level. Now, I am not speaking to you sentimentally or religiously, but practically. The idea of sacrifice runs through all esotericism and is implicit in all the work teaches. But the work very rarely mentions the word sacrifice, speaking instead of transformation. If you genuinely forego something, it has a chance of transforming itself. Now, to speak more coarsely, we often receive eggs, but never take the trouble to hatch them into chickens. In fact, we usually eat our eggs. Example, identify. The egg is an excellent symbol of a new life. G used to call the French Institute an incubator in which we ourselves were the eggs, and the friction was the heat that could transform them. Of course, looking back, one can see that this was so. One can see that all these frictions, these difficulties that we felt so acutely, were the means whereby we could have transformed ourselves if only we had practiced the work, if only we had lived the work and not made inner accounts and identified with our inner states, and above all, if we had remembered ourselves. Easter is not something that comes once a year, but something that comes every day. The idea of non-identifying, or dying to some typical mechanical reaction, is a daily possibility, and if it is done in a spirit of a kind of gaiety, it will gradually result in energy being transformed daily and passing upwards to another level, which after a time will become a distinct experience to you. Would you call this kind of work effort increasing entropy or decreasing entropy? Are you making more energy or losing energy if you work on yourself? Everything you do mechanically, just like everything that happens in the universe, tends to increase entropy and bring about eventually a sort of stalemate, a sort of equalization of everything. But every effort of work increases force, as you can see quite plainly in the octave that starts from self-remembering, whereby higher energies are produced in us. The sacrifice of Christ was to decrease entropy for humanity. Meeting physical danger can be thought of as entropy because it is a sacrifice of physical life. A man may do enough that way and then come to the point where he has to decrease entropy in other ways by other kinds of work on himself. All kinds of mechanical sacrifice, if done in the right way, lead to an evolution. And just as Napoleon chose his best and bravest generals to be princes and governors in order to prevent the downfall of society after the French Revolution, He was actually choosing the most sacrificial types on that level. But this is not enough for the full evolution of a man, which is a definite path marked by definite stages. In fact, a way that has to be traversed by everyone who seeks to evolve internally and so fulfill his real meaning of creation. Just in the same way, mechanically, we have to pass through states of ordinary development and become good householders as a necessary starting point. But when it comes to psychological development, which the work is speaking about, which takes us on the level of good householder, we have to have new knowledge and begin to make efforts in a quite different way. In the paper that follows, you will be able to see something of what this means. Now I will stop, because I will write about entropy more fully in connecting the science of the West with the wisdom of the East, which is one of our tasks. But I will ask you only one thing. If you always follow the easiest path, if you are always ruled by pleasure, self-love, and self-gratification, do you not increase entropy and become staler and staler, and heavier, and more difficult and tiresome, and exacting and small-minded? That is to say, you come to a state where only very slight differences work in you, very slight differences of potential, and eventually you will certainly be quite dead psychologically. But if you practice dying to things in yourself, gradually you will become more and more alive. This certainly sounds very paradoxical. Now, if you have an aim and try to keep it, if only for a short time, you will increase available energy or potential in yourselves. Yes, you will, if you are sincere in your efforts, because you will be going against your mechanical selves in a particular direction. You will be making work effort, which gives force. Now, I will only add that all this is to do with the idea of Easter, with the idea of a sacrificial rite, with the idea of killing something which rises again transformed, different from what it was. Remember here ascending octaves, and remember triads that end up worse than they started, and triads that end up better than they started. We are going to speak of these next time in connection with entropy.